Okay, thank you. The views expressed at this meeting are not necessarily endorsed by the Center. Our objective is to stimulate discussion and critical thinking on social and political issues. So now I'll turn it over to Craig Wanke. He's also a MPJC board director, and he'll introduce our speaker for tonight.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. And welcome to our speaker, Dr. Kang Liao. He teaches English to Chinese translation at Middlebury Institute of International Studies at Monterey. He's also an associate professor teaching Chinese at the Defense Language Institute in Monterey. Dr. Liao is a scholar of the work of Pearl Buck. He authored the book Pearl S. Buck, A Cultural Bridge Across the Pacific, which is available on Amazon. He credits Buck's work for transforming American attitudes towards China, leading to the repeal of the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. So his work is very important historically. In tonight's presentation, he will use Samuel Huntington's book, The Clash of Civilizations, and the remaking of world order as a jumping off point to explore the process of assimilation of cultures. He will draw references from Pearl Buck's 1943 novel Peony and examine the unique experiences of the Jews in Kaifeng, China. And we will have a Q&A following the presentation. And we urge you, if you have any questions, to enter them as per procedure into the little question button. I've known Dr. Liao for, I guess 8 or 10 years. He worked at a language company where I did language line services. And he's got a tremendous sense of humor, and a depth of history too. He was present for the Tiananmen Square ordeal in China before he left. So he's got a depth and breadth and is one of the finest linguists that I know in English. And he's authored a number of very beautiful things in English. So a big welcome to Dr. Kang Liao.
Thank you very much, Craig. And thank you, Catherine, for organizing this. And Craig is my old friend. We worked together for more than 7 years on language line services. And after I left language line services, I began to work with Defense Language Institute. And we kept in touch. We always have lunch together all these years, more than 15 years after I left language line services. An old friend of mine. And I guess I know some of you. We've met at the presentation about Tiananmen Square event. And I thank you very much for showing your concern about China and about peace and about the Pearl Buck, whom I'm really interested in and passionate about. And did my PhD on Pearl Buck's cultural contributions in her literary works. This one is actually adapted from one chapter of my book, Implications of the Chinese Jews Assimilation, depicted in her novel, Peony. So I'll just go straight to the presentation, which is written, so I'm going to read it aloud. And all right, I'll begin. Okay. After the collapse of Soviet Union and Eastern European socialist camp in 1989, Francis Fukuyama published a long article in the summer issue of the National Journey, number 16. It's called A National Interest, number 16, titled The End of History. All the notes there, okay. This article expanded later into a book, The End of History and the Last Man, published in 1992. The phrase, the end of history, was first used by the French philosopher Antoine-Augustin Gounod in 1861, quote, to refer to the end of the historical dynamic with the perfection of civil society, unquote, and was further defined by the German philosopher Hegel, that history is a protracted struggle to realize the idea of freedom latent in human consciousness. Thus, the success of the struggle is the end of history. Indeed, we won. We defeated the forces of totalitarianism. Liberal democracies and free market capitalism might have signaled the end point of humanity's socio-cultural evolution and become the final form of human government. In those years, everyone was talking about the end of history. This catchy phrase caught the euphoria of our victory, which, however, was dulled by the recessions with oil price shock in 1990, the collapse of the speculative dot-com bubble afterward, the September 11th attacks, the war that dragged on and on in Afghanistan and Iraq, the break of the housing bubble and the global financial crisis. History did not end. We are not free from fear. We're not free from want. Indeed, the Cold War was over and the age of ideology ended. But soon, different cultural and religious identities became the primary cause of conflict. And this kind of conflict proved to be no less severe than the ideological one. History has entered a new phase, the clash of civilizations, as Samuel Huntington put it in his book published in 1996, The Clash of Civilizations and the Remaking of a World Order, in which he predicts that future wars will be fought not between countries, but between cultures. Does it have to be wars? Did war ever resolve cultural and religious conflicts? Despite 300 years persecution of the Christians in the reigns of Nero, Diocletian, and Galerius, Christianity thrived and was legalized in the Roman Empire by Constantine the Great in 313 CE. I can say AD usually, but nowadays people say CE, the Common Era, which is possibly politically more correct. Okay. Despite 4 crusades and the 2 centuries attempt to recover the Holy Land and suppress paganism and heresy, the Catholic Church was nowhere near its goals, led to the rise of the Islamic Ottoman Empire in the 14th century. Despite the Roman destruction of Jerusalem and the Jewish diaspora, despite anti-Semitism in Rome, Nazi Germany, and the Middle East, Judaism was not eliminated. Zionism was realized, and Israel was reestablished in 1948. Perhaps cultural and religious conflicts should be and can be resolved by peaceful means, by tolerance, and by love. Pearl Buck has demonstrated the confluence of a cultural conflict, the Jewish assimilation in Kaifeng, China, in her novel Peony, published in 1948. Through her writing, we see why and how the Jews assimilated into the Chinese culture as well as the Chinese race. The story may shed some light on settling the clash. Some scholars date Jews' arrival in China to the Tang Dynasty, which is from 618 to 907 CE, or even earlier. But most scholars agree and know for sure that a large group of Jews came in the 12th century and settled in Kaifeng, the capital of the Northern Song dynasty, which is from 960 to 1127 CE. And their earliest synagogue was built in 1163. This fact was unknown to the Europeans until 1605, when a Jew came from Kaifeng, who had come to Beijing to take the capital examinations, visited Matteo Ricci. He visited Matteo Ricci, was an Italian Jesuit priest who had become an advisor to the imperial court, Wan Li, it's the Ming Dynasty. A lot of people know many people don't know about Matteo Ricci, but you all know the other famous guy who published a book about China, his adventures in China. It was even made into a TV series. His name just escaped me. Marco Polo. Okay, Marco Polo. But probably Marco Polo never even set foot on the land of China. He heard the stories when he was in prison, and he was a good writer. He wrote the book, which was very popular. But there was no record in China that he had ever been to China, and he bragged that he was appointed a high-ranking official in China, but there was no record, no proof whatsoever. But Matteo Ricci was real. Okay, he was appointed a high-ranking official in the Ming Dynasty, and according to Ricci's account, his visitor named An Aitian, explained that he worshipped only one god. You know, Chinese people, worshipped many gods. We are polytheism. It is recorded that when this Aitian came and when he saw a Christian image of Mary with Jesus at Ricci's office, he believed it to be a picture of Rebecca and Jacob. With the publications of the Jews in China in 1843 and the Orphan Colony of Jews in China in 1872 by James Finn, the Kaifeng Jewish community of China became known to some scholars in the West. It's still not very well known in the West, only to some scholars. Okay, you see, these are the pictures of the synagogue in Kaifeng and the interior of it. That's in Tel Aviv. What the Western scholars found amazing was that the Kaifeng Jews were completely assimilated into Chinese, culturally and physically. See these pictures there, Kaifeng Jews, and 2 tablets, which I'm going to mention later on. And their synagogue was, when the Western scholars found, what they found amazing was that they, completely assimilated into the Chinese culturally and physically. Their synagogues were abandoned. Their Torah scrolls were lost. Their religious practices merged into those of Muslims. As Michael Pollack, the authoritative scholar of Chinese Jews, attested, quote, physiognomically, linguistically, and culturally, they have all become as Chinese as their neighbors, unquote. And Lawrence Kramer confirmed, quote, photographs taken by Brown in 1933 show that the Kaifeng Jews were indistinguishable from other Chinese, unquote. The only difference that marked their uniqueness was that they ate kosher food. This rare social phenomenon drew the attention of many scholars, who discussed why and how it could happen in China. Whereas in most other countries, except the USA, Jews always kept their belief and customs without assimilating into another culture, let alone another race. They always remained Jews. Sidney Shapiro said that the most important factor was China's racial equality and religious tolerance. Some scholars, including Lawrence Kramer, mentioned the similarities between Chinese and the Jewish cultures. A few others, such as Donald D. Leslie, suggested the Jews' isolation in Kaifeng and the flooding of the synagogue as the factors of the assimilation. These are the notes. Okay. Shapiro's point is self-explanatory. However, one cannot help but ask, are the similarities between Chinese and Jewish cultures more than those between Christian and the Jewish cultures, or even more than those between Arabic and the Jewish cultures? As for isolation, Kaifeng was the capital of China in the Northern Song dynasty, and it has always been a major metropolis connected by the Silk Road with the Chinese Turkestan, the Middle East, and Europe. Surely it cannot be more isolated than the tiny village of Anatevka in Tsarist Russia, depicted in The Fiddler on the Roof, where Judaism was very much alive. And as for flooding, one may report that any church, temple, or synagogue is subject to natural destruction or deterioration. As long as people have faith, they will repair or rebuild it. Pearl Buck's novel preceded most scholars' discussions of the assimilation issue. She emphasized the importance of racial equality and the religious tolerance, as well as the kindness and open-mindedness with which Chinese treated Jews and intermarried them. Of course, being a writer of literature, Pearl Buck did not discuss the issue, but she demonstrates vividly how the assimilation takes place through the story of Ezra ben Israel's family in the novel. Highly recommending the novel Peony, H.R. Forbes caught its theme and commented, quote, the conflicts inherent in the Chinese and Jewish temperament are delicately and intricately faced with profound wisdom and a compassionate understanding in this tale. This is an enchanting story, the theme of which is tolerance, unquote. The love story in the novel is not very stirring, in my opinion, because the novel is not so much about a love between a man and a woman as about the conflict and the confluence between Jewish and the Chinese cultures. The love failures are the result of the conflict, and tolerance is the key to the confluence. Therefore, the emphasis of the novel is on the development of the young master David's cultural awareness rather than on love between David and the Guilian, Leah, or Peony. The conflict is not so much between their love for David as between the Jewish and the Chinese cultures intertwined in their love story. For the sake of his business, Ezra wants his son, David, to marry the Chinese merchant Yun Chen's daughter, Gui Lian. For the sake of her religion, Madame Ezra wants David to marry the rabbi's daughter, Leah. David's bondmaid, Peony is the name of the bondmaid, despite her own love for David, serves as a go-between for David and the Gui Lian, with the hope that she can become his concubine if he marries Guilian. At first, Leah's feeling for David, on top of her sweet childhood memory, is more religious than worldly. Before moving to Ezra's house, upon Madame Ezra's request, she thinks if she could marry David, she would, quote, move David's heart to rebuild the synagogue and to fulfill all her father's dreams. Remember, her father is the rabbi. The remnant of their people, who were so scattered, would be brought together again in the new synagogue, and David would be the leader of them. David is attracted to Leah only for one day, when he has been awakened from his pleasure-filled life by Gaulian's report of the persecution of Jews in the European countries. His awakening, however, makes him more interested in knowing about his own people. Why are they different? Why are they persecuted? David begins to learn why, not only the external, but also internal reasons. Here I'm going to emphasize the internal reasons. After listening to the argument between Kong Chen, a Confucian scholar, and the rabbi, who has insisted on calling Kong the son of Adam and calling David the son of God in chapter 6 of the novel. Here I quote, it's another one. Kong Chen was much surprised. I'm no son of Adam, he declared. Indeed, there is no such name among my ancestors. The heathen people are all the sons of Adam, the old rabbi. No, Kong Chen found his own laws. I do not wish to be called the son of a man whom I have never heard, he declared. Moreover, I do not like to hear any man call only himself and his people the sons of God. Let it be that you are the sons of your God. But there are many gods. There is only one true God. Jehovah is his name, the rabbi declared, trembling all over as he spoke. So the followers of Muhammad in our city declare, Kong Chen said gravely, but they call his name Allah. Is he the same as your Jehovah? Oh, beyond his earth we can know, he cried in a loud, firm voice. It is for this that God has chosen my people, that we may eternally remain mankind of him who alone rules. We are gadfly to man's soul. We may not rest until all mankind believes in the true God. All the anger faded from his heart, and he said in the kindest voice, God, if there is a God, not choose one man above another, or one people above another. Under heaven, we are all one family. When the rabbi heard this, he could not bear it. He lifted up his head and he prayed thus to his God, "O God, hear the blasphemy of this heathen man." David was torn between pity and shame, and he ran after Kong Chen and caught him. I beg your forgiveness, he said. End of the quote. Well, I emphasize the internal reasons because we all know the external reasons. Jews made laws and regulations to limit the Jews' activities. We're not allowed to buy land, so that's why we put all businesses, financial businesses, loans. Anyway, Thus, the two grown-ups cannot change one another, but the young listener is changed. David has begun to doubt if his people are right to assume cultural supremacy. After dialogue in chapter 6 with Kang Liao, his father's trusted partner, who has also given much thought to the Jews' fate, he finally realizes that the following claim is partly why his people are not loved else, but are often persecuted. I quote, Gao Lian's small eyes grew sharp. I will tell you what I dare not tell any other soul. But you are young. You have the right to know. They were hated because they separated themselves from the rest of mankind. They called themselves chosen of God. Do I not know? I come from a large family, and there was one among us, my third brother, who declared himself the favorite of my parents. He boasted of it to the rest of us. I am the chosen one, he boasted, and we hated him. I would gladly see him dead. Not why kill him, but if he died, I would not mourn. In the big, silent, shadowy room, David stared at Gao Lian with horror. Are we not the chosen of God? He faltered. Who says so? Except ourselves, Gao Lian. But the Torah, David faltered, written by Jews, bitter with defeat. Gao Lian said, end of the quote. Most Jews, as Perlbach describes in chapter 1, were grateful that the Chinese were tolerant, rarely argued with them, and had never persecuted them. On the contrary, the practical Chinese found the Jews a clever people, full of energy and wit. Often the rich Chinese, quote, indolent with years of good living, employed a Jew to manage his business. Almost as often, he gave a second or third daughter to the Jew for his wife. Unquote. The Chinese were not deliberately trying to change them, but to get along with him, so that all could be prosperous. Only a fanatic like Madame Ezra in the novel is tired of such kindness the Chinese show to them, and blame the Chinese for destroying them by enticing them into good living and intermarriage. And only a fanatic like her, as depicted in chapter 3, would like to give up a comfortable life in China and go back to Palestine, a small piece of dry land. Perlbach also describes how David compares the teaching of Jehovah with that of Confucius in chapter 5. Quote, the rabbi had demanded that he learn by heart the curses that Jehovah put into the mouths of prophets against the heathen. Thou shalt surely kill him. Thine hand shall be the first upon him to put him to death, and afterwards the hand of all the people. And thou shalt stone him with stones that he dies, because he sought to because he sought to thrust thee away from the Lord thy God. Such words David learned, and he hated them, even while he knew them to be the words of Jehovah. He dared not speak his hatred, and he found comfort by going to the little house of his tutor and sitting with the mild old man in his quiet court. There he listened to other words than the gentle Chinese read all day. To repay evil with kindness is the proof of a good man. A superior man blames himself. A common man blames others. We do not serve men as we should. How can we serve God? How can we know how to serve God? Anyone like David who has not experienced ill treatments and injustice will naturally find the Confucian teaching reasonable. Anyone like David who has not experienced any racial discrimination or genocide will be unlikely to feel the need of a spiritual force so powerful as the Jews' jealous God to sustain his cultural supremacy, which may be a symptom of an inferiority complex. For some people, to serve God is the only way to serve themselves, because they have not much else left. For David, though, to serve people is the way to serve God. Moreover, David sees the injustice of Leah's self-righteousness when she refuses to admit her brother Aaron's wrongdoing. David also sees the tragedy that Leah's self-righteousness causes, her own death. Thus, he married William and is assimilating into Chinese culture, as he later says to his father in chapter 12, quote, "We cannot live here among these people and remain separate, father," David argued. In the countries of Europe, yes, for their people force us to separate from them by persecution. We cling to our own people there because none other will accept us, and we are martyred and glorified by our martyrdom. We have no other country than sorrow, but here we are all a friend to us and receive us eagerly into their blood. What is the reward for remaining apart? Indeed, it is so, Ezra said. All that has happened to us is inevitable. Inevitable. And so your sons, my grandsons, will proceed still further into this mingling. Ezra went on. It will be so, David said. Ezra pondered. Shall we then disappear? No, that's his warning. David did not reply. It was inevitable, as he himself said, when people were kind and just to one another, that the walls between them fell, and they become one humanity. Many Jews had assimilated before David. Their holidays coincide with the Chinese festivals, as mentioned in chapter 6 of Peony. Quote, thus, the rites of Passover and of Purim had mingled with the Chinese festival of spring, and the feast of first fruits with the feast of the summer moon, and the sacred 10 days of penitence before Yom Kippur came often at the feast of the new moon year, so that even David escaped too easily from the penitence to pleasure. Quote, the Jews have carved on the stone of the synagogue these words as from the time of Abraham, when our faith was established, and ever after, we the Jews of China have spread the knowledge of God, and in return, we have received the knowledge of Confucius and Buddha and the two cultures thus have been blended together. That quote actually is from the historical documents. However, David is not yet completely changed. His early religious education still works against his natural feelings. He cannot happily take Peony as a concubine, although he loves her and knows that she loves him, and Guilian would not mind. Guilian Pearl Buck told us in chapter 13, that which his mother had pressed into his unwilling soul had taken root there. He had defined it and crucified it, but it was not. It lived in him still, the spirit of the faith of his own people. Even when Peony is in danger of being taken away by the licentious chief steward of its Empress Dollars, he still locks her out and leaves her to no choice but to become a nun. Fortunately, David and Guilian continue to have close contact with Peony after she has entered the nunnery, and she later becomes a wise mother abbess. This ending is a small tragedy of the cultural conflict to some readers and a great triumph to others. As human beings, we all wish that all the lovers of the world to become united in wedlock. As moralists, we will not allow polygamy to be practiced by good people. Nothing, I ask all. Nevertheless, all human beings can, at least, live in peace, as the novel demonstrates. If we are not so fanatic about the religious beliefs, Jews assimilated in China mainly because they met with kindness and tolerance instead of discrimination and persecution. This is no fiction. The Jews' own inscription records the Song Dynasty emperor's welcome and the tolerance. Quote, "You have come to our central plain, preserve your ancestral customs, and settle in Bian Liao," which is another name for Kaifeng. The inscription also demonstrates after more than 300 years since they erected the first synagogue in 1163. Quote, "The friendly relations the Jews enjoyed with their hosts and the gratitude they still felt for the freedom of religion which had been granted to them." Unquote. Michael Pollack best summarized it in the following passage. I quote, "In China, no ruler ever singled out the Jews for persecution, and they were never enslaved. The numbers of the Chinese Jews, unlike those of the Hebrews, remained always small, and again, unlike the Hebrews, they never departed from the country to which their forefathers had come. The parallel their stone inscriptions of 1489 had tacitly drawn, whether by chance or by design, between the two arrivals, theirs at the court of the Song and that of the Hebrews at the court of the pharaohs, did not extend beyond either event. In the final analysis, however, the Hebrews who said, 'Let us be Egyptian in all things,' did not prevail. As for the Jews who said, 'Let us be Chinese in all things,' they, it would seem, carried the day." End of the quote. The fact that Judaism in Kaifeng was mingled with Chinese religions and philosophies was also shown by several couplets carved on the vertical tablets in their synagogue. I mean those two tablets I've shown you earlier. Okay, here, yeah, these two tablets. Okay, one of the tablets, illustrates that the Jews' God is no different from Tao or the Way, and their religions is more social and ethical rather than supernatural, just like Chinese religion, or rather philosophers. Quote, In using the way as the coordinator of heaven, earth, man, and the things, we do not think of its name or form. In establishing the religion for the harmony of prince, parents, master, and friends, we are not concerned with abstractions. Okay, you see, these are the couplets, so you can see the parallel structure. The Jewish assimilation in China suggests that any culture or human institution can change without violence. Civilization develops in cultural exchanges. We can learn from one another what is better for ourselves if we take a tolerant attitude toward our differences. We should have confidence in humanity that we are all able to improve and to progress without killing or bloodshed. Even if such a change takes a longer time, it is worthwhile. It may be more fundamental because nothing changes if the mind is not. Furthermore, the novel Peony suggests that intermarriage is the key to the future of humanity, the great harmony of the world, the international concord, and the multicultural confluence, or if you like, the new world order. One of the most fundamental reasons that the human races are different now is that humans scattered all over the globe and lived in different places without much contact and communication. No matter whether we believe in creation or evolution, we have at least one viewpoint in common, namely that humans have one and the same origin, from which our ancestors separated and migrated to where we are. All our biological and cultural differences are the results of the separation. So are the prejudices. However, we now can contact one another with advanced means of transportation and communication. We can understand one another more easily than before with modern technologies. All this is not enough only by intermarriage. People of different races be united and their differences diminished. Many literary works, including Pearl Buck's novel, Come, My Beloved, suggest the final test of our belief in racial equality is intermarriage. We may sincerely declare that all races are equal and all should be friends, but emotionally, we may still have a little dislike for a certain race, so little that we usually do not feel it until our daughter is dating or wants to marry a man of another race. Are we going to separate them as Mr. and Mrs. McCart separated the Livy and the Jayton in Come, My Beloved? Or are we going to let them be united as Ezra and Paul have done in Peony? At the end of Peony, we see both Jewish and the Chinese features, the children of David and Guilian. And we find that on the ruins of the synagogue, they have built a new Jewish church, on which a plaque was hung with the name, the Temple of Purity and the Truth. And beneath these words are carved the history of the Jews in their way, together with the Taoist teaching. Quote, the way has no form or figure, but is made in the image of the way of heaven, unquote. According to Taoism, the way of the heaven is shapeless, and it is the abstract universal law that can be found everywhere. Therefore, it is in accordance with the Jews' invisible but omniscient God. It sounds idealistic, but this kind of assimilation did happen in China because it had been religiously tolerant and had little religious restrictions or persecution until the Taiping Rebellion from 1850 to 1864 and the communist regime from 1949. What a pity we forgot how tolerant and inclusive we used to be. Wu Qiuquan, the leader of the Taiping Rebellion, was a self-proclaimed convert to Christianity and a self-proclaimed brother of Jesus Christ. His followers were a small group of cults in the southern province of Guangxi. When local officials launched a campaign of religious persecution against this millenarian sect known as the God-worshipping society, they took up arms. The more suppressions, the more rebellions, which quickly developed into the most violent civil war in China, lasted 40 years. Chinese communists during the Cultural Revolution suppressed all religions, and there was no shortage of fanatics in the party that organized ordinary people to study Chairman Mao's works every day and to launch a revolution in the depths of everyone's soul. They did not purify or revolutionize people, but bored them to death, or rather, to quiet resistance and cold callousness. As soon as Mao died, his so-called revolution was over. Now, Chinese people have awakened from the frenzy of the Cultural Revolution. China is again open to the world. Chinese people found a repository of cultural treasures in Pearl Buck's novels. We learned how Chinese peasants and farmers lived in the past. And we found how emperors and ordinary people treated different races and religions in ancient times, different races and religions in ancient times. Chinese writers in the past did not write about these people and such things. The traditional Chinese men of letters only wrote about emperors, kings, royalties, aristocrats, highbrows, well, and highwaymen in one novel. The revolutionary Chinese authors only wrote about class struggles and the peasants' uprisings. Thanks to this great American woman writer, who was actually more Chinese in spirit than most Chinese scholars, we have realistic depictions of the lives of ordinary Chinese people. More than 20 doctoral dissertations and more than 80 master theses have been written on the cultural value of her literary works by Chinese scholars and students. The revival of Pearl Buck was also marked by the establishment of the Pearl Buck's cultural park in Zhenjiang, her hometown in China. We realized that her novels, like Peony, can help both Chinese and Americans find better ways to deal with the racial and the cultural problems. China and the United States are both big countries with multiple races and cultures. Racial and cultural problems are, in the end, not only the business of the policymakers or legislators, but the business of every citizen. Communism has failed in Eastern Europe and China, but this is not yet the end of history, as Fukuyama so joyously heralded. Almost every social problem within the United States is associated with race and culture, one way or another, let alone the international problems. The journey to freedom is still long and arduous. History, by Hegel's definition, will not end soon. on the way to achieving freedom and democracy everywhere, everyone shares the responsibility. For the conflict is not only between countries, but also among people. We need to advocate tolerance and intermarriage. We can learn from one another and from our experiences and the history of Chinese Jews. Novels like Pearl Buck's Peony serve as an appropriate media by which we learn not only the historical events, but also the people in them, how they changed and how we can change too. Thank you very much. Now I'm ready for your questions.
Thank you, Kang Liao. Please unmute yourself. You can turn your video on if you like. You can put your questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand. And perhaps if you stop sharing your screen, Kang, then we can go into gallery view.
Okay, how do I?
Stop sharing, I think that's...
Oh, yes, I saw. Yes.
Uh-huh. All right.
Okay.
Thank you. So,
how's my time? Did I take too much time? Oh, 1 hour. About
1 hour, that's good timing. So just, well, while others are waiting to raise questions or unmute themselves and their videos and come into the discussion, I just a reflection here that the Jews had a history of persecution, Romans in Babylon and so many places. Then in China, they were afforded, they were not persecuted. And so they had no real, they didn't reach out. This is what you said, I believe, that
Yes.
they didn't have the need to reach out to their God for
yes.
strength to deliver them from the struggles.
Yes,
So,
I may add one thing. After the Second World War, Jews came to China during the Second World War for shelters, and we provided shelters to them in Tianjin and in Shanghai and some other places. So after the war, we also provided, we facilitated their returning to their countries, or actually going to reestablish their country in we also encouraged the local Jews, the Jews in Kaifeng, to go if they want to. But none of them did. They said, "We are happy here. We don't want to leave." Yeah. But this is one of the reasons the Chinese are very welcome in Israel. Okay, the Jews are people who hate and who love so fiercely. Okay, if you helped them, they are very, very grateful. And of course, if you did any harm to them, they want to get you, no matter how far you are. They will get you and kidnap you to their country and try you and execute you. Okay, the Jews are such people, and they are very friendly to Chinese. Many friends of mine who went to visit the Jews in Israel simply said when they were in Israel, when they realized that they were Chinese, the Jews, the people of Israel, just wanted them to go to their houses and to be treated there, to have dinner with them. And even during Mao's time, on the surface, we condemned Israel, we supported Palestinians, but secretly we were doing business with Israel. And Israel helped us a great deal with their high tech. Even during Mao's time, most people didn't know. I learned it much later from my friends who was actually doing business with Israel. And China had always been on very good terms with Israel, even though we were condemning them for what they did to the
Oh, okay, interesting. Well, through this, I'm wondering, the Jewish people in the United States have kept more of their cultural and religious identity. Were they so persecuted compared to that experience in China?
No, I think in America, some of them also assimilated into the American culture because we are such a big melting pot, and some of them kept their beliefs. And many of them went to Israel after the war and after the Second World War when Zionism was realized. So they went to Israel to build their new country. But still, many remained here. I mean, some of them assimilated. I don't think they were persecuted in America. Not, no, not on the nationals.
Mm-hmm. There was definitely discrimination.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So any other questions? I don't see anything in the chat.
How do I see things in the chat? Oh,
Well, we'll see. Yeah, there'll be a number or something.
okay.
So one of the something interesting was that it wasn't discovered that the Jewish diaspora, there in China and until, well, how many, 500 years?
Yeah, they came to China, and of course, the Jews know that some of them are in China. And the other Westerners, I mean, the Europeans, didn't know until Ricci, okay, that was
The Jesuit.
yeah, the Jesuit priest. It was when was it? Okay, it was in the 1870s. Well, it was earlier, but the book was
16.
Yeah, 1605. Okay, it was known, but the book was not written until the 1843, and the book about Jews in China published, and some scholars got to know, oh, there were Jews in China, and it's really interesting. But of course, during the Cultural Revolution, under Mao's regime, at least they were not encouraged. So many of them hid their identities. And after the Cultural Revolution, one of my father's colleagues revealed that he was actually a Jew because we began to have better policies towards minority ethnic groups. And then, of course, he looks quite different. Well, somewhat different from other people. He had, his nose and eyes are somewhat different. He's very handsome, but he's certainly somewhat different from other Chinese. And he's a great scientist. He's one of the members of the Meteorology Association, and he often gave speeches and did some science work with UNESCO. And he's actually a Jew. I didn't know until after the Cultural Revolution. My father didn't know. My father was went to the same university, but a few years earlier than he did. He told us he was actually a Jew, and we thought, oh yes, of course, you look like one. He's very handsome, okay, than most Chinese people. Okay? He had big eyes. I mean, his nose is straight, and anyway, he had some different features.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So Beverly Bean has a question. Do you want to go ahead, Beverly?
Yes.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, first, I'd like to say that I am Jewish, and I wanted to address the issue of assimilation in the United States. My sense is that the majority of Jewish people have begun a serious assimilation in this country. And for those who wish to remain Jewish, it's a serious concern that so many Jewish people, more than half, marry outside the faith and raise their children outside the faith. And as every generation goes on, it gets more so. I suspect by the time the Jews have been in America as long as they were in China, they will be indistinguishable also.
Yes. I don't, America had only a history of 200 years. And yeah, as time goes by, are they going to disappear? Maybe his father worried. Well, what do you think of this? Are you worried about it, or
No, I'm not worried because I don't think I'm not religious. I don't think that following the religion in any religion is very important. And I think tolerance and mixing is the best possible way for us to achieve peace. When everybody is all mixed with everybody else, more likely there will be less to fight about. So no, I am not concerned about it, but certainly each generation, for example, my grandparents would have been upset that I did not marry a Jewish person,
Yes.
but my parents are not. And when my child married a non-Jewish person, it did not matter at all to me. So this is how assimilation goes.
Yes, intermarriage, yeah. If we are happy here, why do we have to remain, Jewish or keep the religion? The religion is very important to unite a nation, especially when the nation is under threat. But in America, we are, big melting pot. Okay.
Well, religion has been the greatest source of conflict in all of human history.
As well,
People
yes.
dying for their belief in their God. I don't think it's useful. I think the best part of religion is the inspiration to art and culture, the beautiful things that are created, but not certainly keeping people fighting each other.
How about morality?
I think there's only one really important thing, and all the religions teach it. It is the golden rule. And if all of the people keep teaching that, they don't need to follow a religion to practice that.
Yes, I believe in that. And I certainly, one rule, in China, we say, don't do to others what you don't want to be done to yourself. That's the only commandment we have, okay? Just the one commandment. I think
one of the most famous Jewish sages said the same thing. That is all of Torah. That is all you need to know.
But I have to say this. When I first went out of China, I went to study in Scotland. And I was reading a novel written by Sir Walter Scott. It's called The Heart of Midlothian, which is the name of a prison. They call it The Heart of Midlothian. The most important plot in the novel is that a young Scottish girl had a baby, and then she killed the baby. The baby died. But by then, she was tried. And at that time, the Scotland had a law. If you were pregnant and you didn't tell anyone, and then the baby died, you are guilty. But if you told someone, the baby died, it could be, natural death, okay, because you didn't try to hide your pregnancy. This young girl, her mother died a long time ago. She was actually raised by her elder sister. And she begged her elder sister, she said, please, in the court, just tell them that I told you. Okay, I told you that I was pregnant. Just lie, to save me. But her elder sister said, I cannot lie. She said, nobody will know, but he knows. In that book, capital letter he, I understood she was talking about God. That's the first time I was touched. I realized if you really believe in religion, believe in God, the bonding is so much stronger than the your earthly teaching, worldly teaching, don't do harms to others, or don't do unto others what you don't want to be done to yourself. But he knows, like, he's almighty, all-knowing. And in court, indeed, when the judge asked her, did your younger sister tell you that she was pregnant? Painfully, she said, no. And her younger sister fainted. And her younger sister just cried, and she fainted. And after the trial, he walked all the way from Edinburgh to London to beg the Queen for pardon. And the Queen heard the story. She suffered a great deal on the way, okay? And but when the Queen heard her story, the Queen was so touched. This is a pious, good woman, and she pardoned her sister. And that's the main core of the core of the novel. And it has many other plots, but that part really touched me. That made me realize, if you truly believe in God or in a religion, it's much more binding than any human teaching, or what my mother taught me, or your friends might know, or you might hurt other people. But no, you are not hurting anyone. But God knows, He knows. But anyway, I just want to share my experience with you. That's when I realized how powerful religion could be as far as morality is concerned. If you truly believe in God, in religion, you probably are not going to do anything bad, even when nobody is watching. You're certainly not going to cheat in a test, in an examination, as some of my students often do. Anyway, that's a bit of my experience.
So in the novel Peony, was it Confucianism? Is it Confucianism? Was that the dominant religion in Kaifeng?
Yeah, Confucianism is not really a religion, but rather a philosophy. But it's almost as strong as a religion. That's what I mean when I say that religion is more powerful in teachings and philosophy. But yes, religion. David learned Confucianism from the Confucian scholar, which he found, really mild and reasonable, more suitable to his temperament.
So it could have been that maybe there was some common ground there that is, as a code of living, that was sufficient to, for both the Chinese and the Jews.
Yes, yeah.
To embrace.
And I remember 30 or 40 years ago, there was a book, 30 years ago maybe, there was a book called Everything I Really Need to Know I Learned Before I Was 5. Something like that. It's a long title. Yeah, basically that's to say that all your moral teachings are given by your mother. You learned that at home rather than in school. You can learn it in church later on, okay, or in school, but actually your mother already taught you. That's China's religion. Okay, I mean, you can call it a religion or moral teaching. You learned everything from your mother. All I mean is you do not have to have a religion in order to be moral. You can learn to be moral, from other sources, not necessarily. Even in the West, even in America. I think it's a senator who wrote the book. I forgot his name.
Everything I know, I learned in kindergarten.
Oh, in kindergarten. Yes. Yeah. That's the book.
Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions. Just speak up if you have comment or question? But you'll have to unmute yourself.
I know that for those who have not read the novel, probably I don't know, it might be confusing or you don't know what I'm talking about. But anyway, still the point is clear that tolerance and the love can change the most, can change people's mind and can even help the Jews, actually did help the Jews assimilate into the Chinese culture. And so the novel, on the other hand, also pointed out Jews themselves are partially responsible for persecution, for the non-assimilation young. That's Pearl Buck's opinion.
Okay.
Yeah, and maybe that's one of the reasons the church didn't like her very much. Eventually, they parted way. Yes.
Her parents were missionaries, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So,
And she also did a lot of missionary work, but eventually they parted way. Church.
mhm. It's an interesting insight. I read the book and it shows its age a bit. Yet I think it's probably as authentic, depiction of that of what she was witnessing or when she was living there.
The most valuable part is that she noticed this first. I mean, scholars never discussed this issue, the Jews' assimilation in China. We began to discuss this issue in the early 80s last century. But she published the book in 1948, much earlier than the scholars. Well, I mean, of course, in the West, scholars mentioned this, but they didn't really discuss why Jews assimilated. They just wrote about the Jews in China, letting the world know, wow, there's a group of Jews in China, and they became Chinese. They just mentioned that, and they didn't really discuss why until much later. Much later than Pearl Buck wrote the novel.
Isn't it true, though, that they were highly educated, or some of them were highly educated, and so
Yes.
in that respect, they had something really to offer to the governance, local governance?
Yes, very much so. The Jews are very industrious. They are very diligent. They pay so much attention to education. That's like Chinese, and more so than Chinese. They work hard, and that's why I mentioned the rich Chinese people, merchants or landlords always wanted to hire a Jew to help them manage the business. And that's very true. And I really cannot think of another, maybe this is not politically correct to say that, I cannot think of another race that emphasizes education so much as Jewish people, Chinese. In America, I think most people wouldn't pay for children's education, college. Okay, in China, if you passed the examination and become a college student, no matter how poor your parents are, they're going to pay for the tuition fees for the college expenses. I mean, no exception. I can't say 100%, but 99%. People, their parents, it's just a natural thing as buying food for the children. But that's not the case in America. I know for sure, I teach many college kids, and most of them, or at least more than half of them, are trying to earn money to pay for their college themselves. But in China, it's a given. Parents must pay for college, must pay for their kids' college expenses. And that's given, that's natural.
So, well, education, that's a cultural level or two, I believe. This account that you mentioned here of this was back in the 1600s when this person went to a university, he was applying, and then the Jesuit priest was there asking him questions. Oh yes, Rebecca. He said he saw that thinking, and the Jesuit priest was thinking that he was looking at Mary,
Yes.
the mother, and he's thinking, oh, Rebecca.
Ah.
And so this also,
yes. Yeah.
this is how, when you're not in a conflict, you can observe these similarities in this commonality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think in that sense, education would present that opportunity.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I don't see any more questions. It's interesting to hear you talk about this, and we thank you for your presentation tonight. And we thank all of you for joining us and learning about this fascinating topic. We want to invite you all to join us on Saturday, August 7th, for the 17th annual Hiroshima Nagasaki Remembrance Day and Peace Lantern Ceremony. It's in Pacific Grove at Lovers Point Cove, and it's from 7 to 9 p.m. This is an annual event. We reaffirm the vision of a world free of nuclear weapons, and we remember those who suffered the atomic bombings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki 76 years ago. The event will begin with a traditional taiko drumming, and the public is invited to make peace lanterns. Our keynote speaker is Aki Oe. He's a local abstract artist. He's a survivor of the August 6, 1945 atomic blast, and his art reflects his experience as an Asian American. And the peace lanterns are set afloat on the cove after sunset. It's a beautiful and moving event. And this is a free event sponsored each year by the Monterey County branch of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. So you can stay informed about the peace and justice, social justice events around the county by subscribing to the weekly peace calendar. It's on our website, peacecentral.org. You can go there and you can subscribe to the calendar to receive it in your email each week. So the Peace and Justice Center in Seaside is open now. We're staffed on Wednesdays between 1 and 5:30 p.m. And you're welcome to stop by the center to browse our lending library of books and CDs, have a cup of tea, or just come and visit. So thank you all again for joining us. Have a good night and stay well.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you for your patience and interest.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.